Namo Narayana Namo Narayana Om Namo Narayana Namo Narayana Om Namo Narayana Namo Narayana Om Namo Narayana Namo Narayana. Om Namo Narayana Om Namo Narayana.
Let's see what they want. Let's see. Huh? Yeah, ask them.
Just moved it up here thinking, oh, get it out of your way.
Canto del mio cuore, mai più discorderò, io mai ti traderò, mai più discorderò, io mai ti traderò. Oh Dio Signore, canto del mio cuore, oh Dio Signore, canto del mio cuore, mai più discorderò, io mai ti traderò. Mai più discorderò, io mai ti traderò. Oh Dio Signore, canto del mio cuore. Oh Dio Signore, canto del mio cuore. Mai più discorderò, io mai ti traderò. Mai più discorderò, io mai ti traderò. Oh Dio Signore, canto del mio cuore. Oh Dio Signore, canto del mio cuore. Mai più discorderò, io mai ti tradirò. Mai più discorderò, io mai ti tradirò. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. Oh cuore canta del mio cuore, mai più discorderò, io mai ti tradirò, mai più discorderò, io mai ti tradirò, mai più discorderò, io mai ti tradirò. I will never forget thee, I will never forsake thee, I will never forget thee, I will never forsake thee.
Buongiorno a tutti, nel brotherhood della 𝗜ʰ l'Assisi, anche voi che ci seguite a casa. Siamo qui con Jyotish and Devi e
We are here with Jyotish and Devi, and Jyotish just asked me to start with a prayer. Let's pray together.
I will be praying in English, speaking in English. So those who do not understand English, please make sure you have the equipment and you will have a wonderful, beautiful accurate translation by some person. Oh. Questo lo devo dire in italiano. Allora, Jyotish and Devi parleranno in inglese, quindi se non capisci l'inglese usa il traduttore, avrete una traduzione bellissima fatta da Satoshi in italiano. Adesso preghiamo in inglese. Heavenly Father,
Celeste Padre, Divina Madre, amico e amato Dio, Gesù Cristo, Babaji Krishna, 𝗚្�િ Swami Sri Yukteswar,
Paramhansa Yogananda,
Gurudeva Paramhansa Yogananda,
saggi di ogni religione,
Santi Saggi di ogni religione,
saints and sages of all religion. And then guide Swami Kriya,
amico e guida Swami Kriyananda,
bow to
ci inchiniamo a tutti voi,
opening our minds to the light of
aprendo
your
le nostre
wisdom,
menti alla luce della vostra saggezza,
our hearts to your love,
i nostri cuori al vostro
our
amore,
soul to your
le
joy
nostre
without end.
anime alla vostra gioia.
Be with us in this satsang.
Siate con noi in questo satsang.
Help us to go deep into
Aiutateci
your
ad andare
teachings
profondamente nei vostri
and in the joy
insegnamenti
of spiritual friendship,
e nella gioia dell'amicizia spirituale,
in this spiritual family,
in questa famiglia spirituale
worldwide and
globale, unita.
peace.
Om, pace. Amen.
So I'm very, very honored and joyful
Siamo
to be able to
molto
present, to
onorati, sono
introduce,
molto
even though they
onorato e
don't need an
gioioso di
introduction,
introdurre,
Jyotish
anche
and
se non
Devi.
hanno bisogno di
Most of
introduzione,
you know
Jyotish e Devi. Quasi tutti sapete chi sono. Loro sono i cofondatori di Ananda Sangha, che è iniziato tantissimi anni fa. Jyotish era con Swami Kriyananda anche prima della fondazione attuale di Ananda Sangha. E lui è stato educato da Swami Kriyananda e hanno insieme condiviso la luce e gli insegnamenti per tanti anni. Dopo il trapasso di Swami nel 2013, Jyotish è diventato il suo successore e lui e Devi hanno continuato a condividere la vibrazione di Ananda come un sentiero al risveglio. Loro scrivono dei meravigliosi blog ogni settimana, scrivono un blog che ci aiutano a restare in sintonia con gli insegnamenti. Loro viaggiano in tutto il mondo, in America, in Europa, anche in India, e noi siamo tanto felici che sono qui ora per condividere questi momenti di amicizia e di condividere gli insegnamenti e l'ispirazione.
start with a little beginning introduction for the questions?
Yes. Thank you, Darshan. It was very kind and very sweet. You know, it sounds like a big work, but to be quite honest, all Devi and I do is take the next step in front of us, and we keep taking it and taking it and taking it. And so far, we've been able to take it for a long time. And when you do that, you are able to travel quite a long distance. But Ananda really is built on the foundation of spiritual friendship. It's not an organization, except that, as Yogananda said,
Fatto, come ha detto Yogananda, quando guardi la casa delle api, come si chiama, ci deve essere questo nido e ci deve essere un'organizzazione anche dove abitano le api e il miele e l'amore di Dio e l'amicizia che noi tutti condividiamo. E noi siamo tutti le api che andiamo fuori e ritorniamo e tutti noi facciamo il nostro servizio e aiutiamo a fare questo miele, però il miele veramente è il condividere degli insegnamenti meravigliosi che abbiamo ricevuti dal Maestro e che
Today
sono
what we will be doing is there have been a number of questions that have been sent in online, and we will be answering those. Our answers, as much as possible, we will stay strictly to the teachings of our line of gurus. If we're going to offer our own opinions or our own experiences, we'll mention that this is what I think, but otherwise we're going to try, as we always do, to stay very true to the teachings that we have received. And
Also add a few words before we begin answering the questions. And they've come from really all over Europe, thanks to Darshan, who prepared them. And we'll answer a few that have been submitted, then we'll answer some from all of you, and we'll try to go back and forth. And we'll just keep going till there are no more questions. Maybe in 4 days we will. No, we won't go that long. But, you know, Jyotish and I actually love doing question and answer time sessions with our gurubhais, because we don't really know the answers, but when we read the question, it's as though the answers come. And we have been so inspired while we've been here with the quality of the music, of the choir, of the individual musicians and so forth. And really, that's what answering questions is like. When I watch the musicians, they're just tuning into, and the art, the designs and so forth, you all are just tuning into a more subtle vibration where beauty and truth reside. And that's what answering questions is like. You're just trying to draw down from a higher plane the truth that God has that answers all of our questions. And when, as Master said, when someone came to him with many, many intellectual questions, he said, "Love God." And the person asked another question, and he said, "Love God." And then he asked another question, and Master said, "Love God." And
got up and walked out of the room.
So that's really the answer to all the questions. Okay.
Well, maybe before we begin, I want to set a little bit of a background, because some of the answers will kind of need a foundation, and instead of repeating the foundation every time, I'll try to set the foundation. So I want to talk a little bit about the soul's journey toward liberation.
I won't go into a long discussion, but when we come into human form, Master said, we have many lifetimes before that, but when we come into human form, Master said we have a special dispensation, and that is that our nervous system and our, more importantly, our astral nervous system, our chakras, are now developed sufficiently so that we can begin the journey of expanding our own self-definition. And ultimately, we have the nervous system and the astral nervous system that is sufficiently developed so that we can have the direct experience of our unity with God. Now, given that, there are countless incarnations. Think at least 100,000 incarnations. That may be a tiny number, but we have a lot of incarnations. And over those incarnations, according to our action, karma, we throw the word around karma. All karma really means is action. So during those many incarnations, just as during this incarnation, we have certain actions. Actions include outward action, thought, feeling, anything that we by our will make a choice. So all those billions and billions of choices cluster around and create tendencies in us. And so these tendencies are what we think of as karma. So when we say, oh, that's my karma, it isn't, that'd be like saying, oh, that's my action. Really, it's shorthand for saying that's the tendencies that I have developed because of previous actions. So we have the actions of previous lifetimes, we have the actions of this lifetime, and we have the influences of the time in which we are born right now, and the family and nation that we're born. All of those influences influence us. Now, as we read these questions, so we can think of this journey of incarnations as in a building with many floors. And so we have experienced all of those floors that are up to our present level. And part of the difficulty of answering these questions is that people are locked into the present level of consciousness and think that's all that exists, and that's the only way we can solve the problems is by shifting the furniture around in the current floor that we're inhabiting. But there are many floors that are above us. And it will go on until we reach complete union with God. So part of the answer for all of the questions, 𝗚ฐ์-𝗀𝗃 said that the answer to every problem is to do Kriya Yoga. But what does he mean by that? So your traffic policeman stops you and you start doing Kriya Yoga? No, he didn't mean that. What he means by Kriya Yoga is the fastest way to elevate our consciousness. And so, how does Kriya Yoga help with a problem with the traffic policeman stopping you? If you're angry and upset and shouting at him, you're in a lot more trouble than if you're calm and uplifted and smile at him and say, what might be the problem? How is your day going? Isn't it a wonderful day? And so elevated consciousness is always helpful. So the real solution to these questions is always going to have some form of elevating our consciousness. And so with that kind of background, then we can go in to specific questions. But Devi and I are always going to bring it around to here's how we can work with elevated consciousness in this kind of a situation. Okay.
Should I read the
Yes,
first one?
please.
Okay, and then we can both answer. Why is it that when we take decisive steps on the spiritual path, such as receiving Kriya Yoga initiation, we often experience very challenging tests shortly afterward? Of course, along with many wonderful things too.
You want to start or you want
Okay,
me to?
it doesn't matter.
You start.
Okay.
I've been talking.
He answered that in his introduction. What Kriya does is it, as Master explains, as Swami has taught us, it loosens the whirlpools of energy, the vrittis in the spine. And these are what lock our karmic tendencies in our consciousness. And so if we have a tendency, let's say in the past we've been dishonest and we've cheated people, but we've tried to change that, but it's still there. Oftentimes, and I've seen it in my friends, all of a sudden these tendencies, and myself, these tendencies start coming up. And why does that happen? Because the process of spiritual liberation is one, you can't skip any steps. You have to go through the process of self-transformation. The Guru, on our behalf, can lessen that, just as we read an autobiography of a yogi where Babaji took a burning branch and he touched one of the, ouch, ouch. He touched one of the disciples, and another disciple said, Master, how can you be so cruel? And Babaji said, would you rather have seen him be burned to death as his karma dictated? By just that little touch of suffering, I resolved the whole predestined suffering he was meant to go through. So the test will come, but if we can say, just when they come, recognize this is a step to freedom. And rather than, oh, I thought God was with me, I've given my life to God, why aren't all the doors of paradise opening? It's not that easy. But it's, on the one hand, it's not that easy, but really, once we make the sincere commitment of discipleship, of self-offering, and Kriya there's another question about this, but Maya Devi has a beautiful, if those of you who are Kriyabans, Maya Devi puts out a beautiful monthly Kriyaban newsletter. And in the last one, there was an article by 𝗙𝗺𝗺𝗺, who's the head of the monastic order of Ananda globally, really, and also was the head of the Kriya Sangha globally. And he, in this beautiful excerpt from a talk, he said each Kriya should be an act of self-offering. And that's the core of all of our spiritual practices. If we see them not as just a technique or I'm doing this because I've been told to do this, but every action, a spiritual practice is an act of self-offering, then the whole process of working out our karma, overcoming difficulties, it becomes both happens more quickly, and we understand it, so we don't resist. We say, okay, I see now, bring it on. I have to overcome whatever it is, dishonesty or whatever, judgment, and let me live through this, but with the understanding not to indulge in it, but to say, I am casting this off. I am offering this to God, and I'm freeing my consciousness from this obstacle.
Swami said that the whole of the spiritual path is meant to dissolve the ego. The ego is simply the delusion that we're separated from God, but Swami has also defined ego as a bundle of self-definitions. So all of those tendencies that we have, it's a bundle of self-definitions. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm an athlete, I'm a musician. All of all of those kinds of self-definitions. Now, when we come on the spiritual path, the whole reason for being on the spiritual path is to dissolve those self-definitions so that we become free, because we're everything. We're everything that is possible, and we're nothing. But here, when this person says, after you make a spiritual effort or you get Kriya, then we get spiritual tests. Well, what do you expect? That's the reason that we take these steps. What is a spiritual test? Some self-definition is getting challenged, and we're getting pushed to try to release that. And what seems hard is not the test, it's the attachment to holding on to that self-definition. And so here we are making a spiritual effort, and then all of a sudden our self-definitions are attacked and challenged. Well, of course they are. That's the reason, that's the whole process of the spiritual path. The less we are attached, the less we resist, the less challenge it seems. And according to different self-definitions, something will be very easy for one person and very difficult for the person sitting right beside them.
Tell the story when you were saying it takes a long time when we were in Darjeeling.
Okay. One time, some many years ago, we were with Swamiji and actually Arjuna and Shivani in India. At that time, we happened to be in Darjeeling. And we were driving. It's a very high city built at a high altitude. And we were driving in a car. We were going, actually, we're going to visit this kind of small community of Tibetan refugees, because there were many Tibetan refugees in Darjeeling. And as we were driving along, as you see in many Indian cities, you see a lot of poverty. And so there were people who were living just in little sheds, and the children were, kind of not, had hardly any clothes and were not very clean, and they were kind of playing in puddles and so on. And then 1 block later, we passed out of that area of the city, and we saw this teacher leading a group of students to school. And they all were dressed so nicely, and they had their uniforms on, and they were all lined up in a lovely little line. And so the same age of the children we had just passed two blocks earlier. And I mentioned to Swami how interesting it is that you see such different karmic circumstances that people are born into. And in the autobiography, if you remember, there's Master says that it takes 1,000,000 years of disease-free, harmonious living in order to be free from delusion. So I said, very stupidly, I said to Swami that I have done the mathematics on that. And if you take the average lifetime, let's say that the average lifetime is, let's make it really easy. The average lifetime is 100 years. Then you have to live 10,000 lifetimes of 100 years to get to 1,000,000 years. But it was less than that, so it was like 66 years. So I said something like, I've done the mathematics, and you have to have 15,000 lifetimes of all these different lives in different circumstances before you're free. And he kind of turned his head and he said, where did you get that tiny number? And I said, I explained my mathematical genius to him. And he said, you have to read more carefully. 1,000,000 lifetimes of disease-free, harmonious living. That's different from how many years of disease-free, harmonious living have you had this lifetime? That's why it takes so many. That's why, how did you get that tiny number? But as long as we're trying, each one of those lifetimes, we ascend another level and another level and another level, and we become free of that which we release when we get challenged, when we make a spiritual effort.
Okay.
Now we'll be shorter in our answers.
We'll only answer yes or no now.
No.
What can we do to make our practices more devotional when they are feeling mechanical?
She's looking at me as if to say, this one is yours to start. Okay. It's an important question because devotion is a very important part of the spiritual process. Now, devotion or any feeling comes from the area of the heart chakra, the Anahata chakra. That's the center of feeling. And in many ways, feeling is the most important of all of our, capacities, because the intellect usually follows the feeling. And so we feel about something, and then we think up a reason why our feeling is correct. So the feeling nature that we have, and Patanjali says that yoga comes automatically when that feeling nature becomes completely calm. When the vrittis or the whirlpools of feeling become calm, we become enlightened. So that feeling nature is very, very important to our spiritual path. Now, usually our feelings go outward in terms of likes and dislikes. When I say outward, outside of ourself. They go outward, I want this, I don't want that, I like this food, I don't like that food, this person pleases me, that person is an idiot, I don't want to have anything. All of those feelings over and over and over again. What we need to do, our whole spiritual path, is to withdraw the energy inward and bring the energy upward. Now, the energy also is in feelings. So think of drawing all of those likes and dislikes into the heart chakra, and then with our practices to bring that energy, that feeling nature up. And when we bring it up here, those likes and dislikes become intense desire for, devotion to, a focus of the mind on God. Emotion and devotion are very similar. Emotion goes out, devotion goes up. And so to develop the capacity to bring our feeling nature in an upward direction is very important. So having said that, how do we do that? For every person, that's going to be somewhat different. So one is to work with the feelings in an uplifted way. That's why the music that we play here is almost always just Swami's music or Master's music or very compatible music, because music has vibration and it arouses emotion. And so by playing music that is innately sattvic or calming or uplifting, it takes that feeling nature and brings it up. Focusing on the Guru and your relationship with him, and really repeating in your mind and in your heart, I love you, or I want to be with you, I want to, please be my friend, be my guide, be my, that connection to the Guru is very important. Connection in an uplifted way with others who have devotion is very important. But anything to understand that devotion isn't something amorphous, it is the upward direction of our feeling nature.
And I'll answer also from a slightly different point of view, that I think, from my experience, the problem is when our meditation practices become mechanical, as this question asks. Yes, we can develop all these devotional qualities, as Jyotish has described, but also it's when the bigger problem is when we become unfocused, when we can meditate on a subconscious level, like 𝗙𝗪𝗪, 𝗙𝗪𝗪, and our mind is a million miles away. Or we can meditate with focused attention, with awareness. Once a young disciple of Master came to him, and she had recently received Kriya, and she said, "Oh, Master, today I did 108 Kriyas." And he said, "One would have been better." Now that's kind of paradoxical. What did he mean? Because she was doing them without focus. Better to meditate honestly for 5 minutes with a focused mind and heart on God and keeping your whole awareness there than to meditate for a longer period and you're thinking about, what you're going to do today. Maybe you're falling asleep a little bit, and we've all had that. But really the key to depth in meditation is not with tension. Tension is the enemy of meditation, but with relaxed, focused awareness. And when just like when you're painting designing a cover, or painting, or music, or planting flowers, or doing business, whatever, if your mind is elsewhere, you don't accomplish it. But if your mind is calmly focused, then you can accomplish whatever you want. We would watch Swamiji. His mind, he had trained it for so many years. Whatever he put his mind to, calm, absolute focus. Once this was at Crystal Clarity, his home, and he had been editing, he was always editing one of his manuscripts, and he had invited us over for tea. It was at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and he just signaled, just wait. And then his secretary, Lakshman, came in and had some letters for him to sign. Swami was editing, and he just wait and finished till he got to the end of that page, put it down, and then he brought his full attention both to the people he had invited for tea and to his secretary to take the questions. But it was so beautiful to see. It was just uplifting to be in that focused mind, the aura of that focused mind. And those of you who spent time with him know it changed how you did everything. And so mechanical meditation often means distracted meditation, where you're just going through the motions but without engaging on a deep level. So everything we do, be present, be absorbed in it. And the more we can do that, the more the doors, that wonderful chant, all the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves. But we have to be present there for those things to happen. Okay, why don't you read the next question?
Okay.
3.
I wanted to ask if Swami ever spoke about the possibility that Ananda might also exist on the astral plane, a place of light and soul friendship that we might go to after leaving the body, if we've earned enough spiritual merit. It's a thought that brings me deep inspiration and hope. Have you ever heard Swami refer to something along these lines? Swami referred to it all the time. He just assumed that before we came into this lifetime, we were all together on the astral plane, and that when we leave this physical body, it's like, were we together yesterday when we were wearing different clothes? Yes, we were. Are we going to be together tomorrow wearing different clothes? Yes, we will. It's just assumed because there's a soul bondship of friendship and love for each other and support and familiarity, that magnetism draws groups of people together. And so we just had a wonderful, wonderful member of this community pass, Vinaya, and all of us just assume that she went straight up and joined Swami, and the group that's already up there with an Ananda community doing work. I think they're busy up there too, so don't get the idea it's all vacation. Not with Swami anyway. They're just up there, and when this body drops off, if we want to, it's because the astral plane responds much more according to what our vibration and what our energy level is. If our energy is attuned to where they all are, that's where we're going to go.
I'm going to embarrass Rudra, who's translating. It's very interesting because he's making big hand gestures as he translates, getting into the spirit. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's Santoshi. I couldn't see your face. So 2 years ago, one of our beloved members at Ananda Village passed away, Anandi, Nayaswami Anandi. She was one of the lights. She came in the early days, and she was a dear friend of mine. In fact, it was amazing. The first day I met her, we were both working in the garden at Ananda Village, and the soil at Ananda Village is like clay. It's very hard to cultivate.
Brick in the summer when it gets hot.
Brick. And so Anandi and I didn't know her, just another person, and we were both raking this brick. And then we just started talking, and I looked at her, and I knew her. And the more we talked, we had grown up right near, within a mile of each other in St. Louis, Missouri, which is 2,000 miles away, but we never knew each other. We went to the same children's camps together, but we never knew each other. And we went to the same shows and playgrounds, but there we were in the middle of this vast field with nothing around us, and we met. And it was just like landing, our souls like landing from the astral world. Oh, hello. But then when she died, when she passed, it was actually so, we were keeping the last weeks of her life. We had people with her 24/7 around the clock. And I'm going on a diversion here, but talking about astral friendship. Our friendship, she was always giving me very practical things like, oh, here's some new sponges that I just found. You'll really like them. And so she's laying in bed. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm just sitting there praying for her. And then she opened her eyes and looked at me. She said, oh, hi, like, we were going to go for a walk. I said, hi. And then she motioned to me to come over, and I came. These are the last words she said to me. There's a wonderful cake in the refrigerator that we're not going to eat. Why don't you take it? I said, okay, I'll take that cake. But then she just went into the light. And someone a few days later, and this is the answer to the question, had this very vivid dream, superconscious dream, that Anandi was surrounded by light, and she was on a little boat on a beautiful river. And then finally, she got to a point, and there was Swamiji, and they were all celebrating, and all other people who had already left the body. They were all together, and she's come, and they welcomed her. So don't be afraid of death. It's this transition, and we have seen our friends just leave their bodies consciously and go into the light, and they're very much there. And a friend of ours, I'll end with this, a man just died about a month ago before we left, and he had been struggling with poor health for 20 years. He and his wife took care of him. They lived at Ananda Village. And finally his heart was not working, and she was taking him to the medical clinic. And he looked at her, very loving man, and he said, "I'm not in my body anymore." And she said, "Where are you?" And he said, "I'm with you." And it was like his soul was already one with her from a higher realm. And then he passed away shortly after that. But she felt him with her. So it's a beautiful, beautiful. We come into this world very often, in families that aren't necessarily spiritually supportive. I will. And but then when we leave, then we find our spiritual family. And then when we leave, we were rejoined with that spiritual family. So it's a joyful thought. Okay.
Any questions from?
Oh yeah, from here. Make your questions short. Don't ask long questions.
Even more important, we need to make our answers short.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go on.
Okay.
So if you have a question, keep it in your mind, because after this, we'll ask again if you have any.
When we are faced with a test, how can we know whether we are meant to accept it with faith or if we should make the effort to change the situation?
Those 2 points of view are not exclusive to each other. When we're faced with a test, we should do whatever we can to face that test logically, not necessarily change everything around, but do what we can to change it. But we should also accept that test has come to us in order to free us from one of those bundles of self-definition that we have. So we should live life, if we can, with the thought that everything, absolutely everything that comes to us as a gift from God to help us become free of some delusion. And then how do we become free of that delusion? Obviously, we should take whatever steps we can. But as I said at the very beginning, the best way to become free of delusion is to raise the consciousness, not to change the circumstances.
Okay, I think that's well said. You want to read the next one?
Okay, anyone else?
Get intimidated.
Yeah, okay. Number 5, she says, in your daily life, how do you deal with the 2 dharmas we think you both had, to be parents of a child and to be spiritual guides? Especially when the children are young, they need time and attention. What were the difficulties you found, and how did you overcome them? Why don't you start? Having a child falls more heavily, the responsibility falls more heavily on the mother than it does on the father. But obviously, in a family, both parents need to adapt. But we'll broaden this to say, how do you deal with wanting a spiritual life when you have some unavoidable responsibility that you cannot ignore, you have to take care of? But I'll let Devi start.
That's what the string I also was going to say. We'll talk first about family, but then it's the same with any commitment or dharma that you have to fulfill that maybe takes time from your seemingly takes time from your spiritual search. But we need to understand, and the question here was our role of as spiritual leaders, but every life has periods. I've certainly seen this where you can just be very focused on your sadhana, on your service, and then, as they say, life gets in the way, and you get sidetracked, and you have to do this or you have to do that. And Swamiji was so sensitive and respectful of our need at different phases of our child's life to spend more time with him and less time in outward service. So of course, when a child is first born, that becomes, there isn't any option but to focus on that. But then as they get older, start going to school, playing with their friends, you have more time, and then you can serve in other ways more. And then maybe the adolescent years come, and you need to spend more time focusing their life, keeping their energy in a positive way. And we went through all of those phases with Swamiji in raising our son. And we would just tell him, we were serving in San Francisco, leading an ashram there, and our son was in preschool, but then it was time for him to start school, and we'd been there 2 years, and we said, Swami, we want our son to go to the Ananda school. I think we need to come back to the village. And he said, that's right. So we did that, and then we were being very active, going outward, teaching a lot. And then our son became a teenager, and we needed to be home more to watch him. And we said, Swami, we can't go out now. He said, that's right. And he always supported if he knew we weren't shirking our responsibilities. He knew this was a genuine dharma that we had to fulfill. But as we were saying, it broadens out beyond just raising children. What if you have a health crisis and you just can't sit up and meditate? Then what do? Do you think, I'm done with the spiritual life? No, you focus on strengthening your body. And there's so many different aspects of our own karma that can get in the way. But I erase what I just said. They don't get in the way. They are necessary steps for our freedom. So I know without any question that the spiritual benefit we both got from raising a soul, helping him to grow up and training him, it was one of the greatest gifts of my life, because no one could outwardly say, oh, how great, you're staying home, you're watching your baby take a nap for hours, what a great thing. No, but I knew I had to do it. And I knew God wanted me to do it. And so it's this act of selfless dharma. And that's a great step in finding God.
And kind of behind this question is, what do you do in those periods to continue a strong spiritual life when your life is really busy? Well, one is, if you don't have much time, then really try to make quality the top priority in your meditations. If you're normally meditating an hour and a half and you can only get in 15 minutes, try to really go deep in those 15 minutes. The other thing is that with a child it's a little different, but with other responsibilities, most of our lives have a lot of free time in them, a lot of discretionary time. And when you're really busy, you have to put a high priority on your sadhana and look at your priorities. And maybe you don't watch movies, maybe you don't read books, maybe you don't do some of the things that Master would say that just waste time. Because there are things in our life where we're just wasting time. When you're really busy, you don't have extra time. But don't make sadhana the first thing to let go of.
And just to add one thought too, whenever we're fulfilling our dharma, doing what's in front of us with the right spirit, it uplifts everyone. And I'll give an example of my friend Ramanand, who went through such difficult health challenges, and during COVID was isolated in the hospital for so long. But whenever we would see a picture of him, his radiant face there, it was like, oh, what a beautiful example of a life given to God. So it's when we do what is in front of us with the right spirit, it uplifts everyone. Okay, so I'll read this.
Yeah, if anybody has a question, raise your hand, and otherwise we'll continue on. Oh, okay, yeah. Of healing methods? Theoretically, no, but practically it depends on how attuned you are to there are many, many, many forces that we are not in touch with. And Master said there really aren't any miracles at all. What we think of as miracles is simply somebody who understands how to use forces that we can't see. And so, theoretically, there are forces that we can use to heal anything. But we can't have to actually be in touch with those. We can't do it just by imagining. And so, theoretically, we can heal anything. On a practical level, we can only use those forces that we're in touch with. But the more we elevate our consciousness, the more we get in touch with subtle forces.
There was, first of all, hello, nice to see you.
He comes every year. It wouldn't be for us a visit to Assisi unless we saw you.
But there was a beautiful story of a woman who lived at Ananda who had a terminal illness, and she had a very good friend who lived elsewhere who also had the terminal illness, and they made a promise with each other, as long as you stay alive, I will stay alive, and they kept encouraging each other. And then our friend got she was living at Ananda Village in her home, but then she got very, very sick and was put in the hospital, and she was just starting to get well again, and the word came that her friend had died. And so Swami told me and another woman to go tell her that her friend had died in the hospital. So we went in to her room, and she was just getting strong again, and Swami was waiting out in the hallway. It was like a test for us. And we couldn't tell her. We just couldn't find the words to tell her. And we came out, and Swami said, well, did you tell her that her friend had died? And we said, no, Swami, we couldn't. And he said, all right, I'll do it. So we went in with him, and he looked at her with so much power, and he said, Swami said, her name was Happy. He said, Happy, your friend died, and you didn't, and now you need to get well. And she did. I mean, she still had the terminal illness, and she died several years later, but she was just on the edge. But he did it with so much power. It was amazing, and he was showing us it's not about sympathy, it's not about, oh, you'll be all right. It's with spiritual power that we didn't have, but he did. So it was an amazing
what
experience.
was behind that was that one element in our health, in our vitality, is our own expectation. And so she had formed this bond saying, if you're alive, then I'll stay alive. And with him dying, then maybe her expectation was, oh, well, then I'm going to die too. Swami went in and with that power changed her expectation. He died, you didn't, now get well. Okay, I'll get well. And she did. So one of the whole aspects of the spiritual path is to keep the mind very strong and very positive. The more we're able to do that, the more our outward activity, our outward health, our outward vitality will follow that expectation. And the more it's weak and passive, the more it will follow that also. Now, it's not the only factor. I don't want to make people feel guilty who've gotten ill and think, oh, I'm just a weakling. No, it's not the only factor. Karma is involved and a lot of other things, but it is a very powerful factor, and it's one of the things that we can control.
Okay. Oh, good for you.
I would like to ask, how do you know that you're not attached to a habit or a situation or a person anymore? Is it maybe that you can still maybe enjoy that situation or thing or whatever, but if you don't get it, you're not hurt anymore? How do you know that you really are free?
Okay, could you all hear? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll repeat the question. So, what is your name? Meta. Okay, so she asked, how do you know when you are free from a habit, or free from attachment to a habit or a person, and that you can move on, essentially, or what are the signs?
Yeah, I'll give a couple of levels. First of all, the first level is that you don't think about it all the time. When you're really attached, you get a mental pattern going and you think about it all the time. So the less it comes into your mind, let's say attachment to a habit. I'll use something simple, smoking, since it's something that people understand. Now there are other ones, attachment to people and holding on to past hurts and holding on to, it's more subtle, but smoking is easy to talk about. When you're first giving up smoking, you think about smoking all the time. And so that's the first level of non-attachment, is that your mind detaches from it. And then the next level is that your emotions detach from it. And so with smoking, your emotions detach from it by you don't have that strong desire whenever you see somebody smoking. And then finally your subconscious begins to detach from it. And in smoking, if you've given up smoking, but you still have a subconscious desire to do it, you get upset when you see other people smoking. When you're completely free from it, you're not upset. You recognize that that's not a good habit, but it's not like you have an emotional reaction to it. So detach your mind, detach your feelings, detach your subconsciousness. And when your subconsciousness is detached, pretty much you're free from that. You may have some karmic holdover, but it's a strong wind will blow that away.
And one other point is there's an inner calmness when you think about the person or the activity, that you're calm and you can just look at it as though an observer rather than with agitated emotions. Exactly. Okay, so these are good questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. And here, I'm going to skip ahead to this one because I think it's a little long, but I'll read it. In May, I visited ASSISI. Before that, I could hardly meditate. I had no concentration at all. But after my time here, something shifted. I began meditating regularly, morning and evening, for 45 minutes, plus a longer meditation once a week. This continued beautifully for several months. ...
Mm-hmm.
Then, about 2 weeks ago, I shared with my teacher how grateful and happy I was about my steady sadhana. Strangely, ever since I said those words, I've been struggling again. My concentration feels scattered, almost as if I've gone backward. Could this be a lesson in humility? Did I become unconsciously proud of my progress? I now feel regret for having spoken about it in that way, and my deepest wish is simply to return to that stillness and connection in meditation. Okay, well, that's a good question, isn't it? And, you know, it's hard to, without really knowing the person, it's hard to give an appropriate answer, but Swami and Master have both said, don't talk about your spiritual experiences. Keep them to yourself, because it's not so much humility or pride, but by putting them into a verbal form, you take them from the superconscious realm to the conscious realm. That's how we relate to others, is basically on the conscious realm. And so by doing that, we lose that point of entry, which this woman gained by being here, that point of entry where you can go into a higher state. So when you have an experience of some kind of depth in meditation, do keep it to yourself. It's better. And then maybe after some time has passed, you can share with others. I know from my own life, years ago, if I had had an unusual, uplifting spiritual experience, I wouldn't talk about it for a long, long time. And then after enough time had passed, you realize, okay, you can talk about that now. It's not going to diminish that experience. But, and another thought is, I read a beautiful article by Master in which he said, you keep calling me, why don't you come? Why don't you come? And the Master said, don't you realize I'm always here? It's you who need to come into the room where I live. And so the beautiful book by Saint 𝗷𝗺𝗺, The Interior Castle, that's where we find God, is in the interior awareness of deep within our own self. And that's where we commune with God. That's where we talk with Him. And so often, those of us who were with Swamiji, every once in a while, he'd be doing something, and then almost inaudibly, he would say something, and he was talking to Master, but it was just so interior. And so to learn to speak the inner language of the soul, and that's where we keep our spiritual experiences between us and God. And it doesn't isolate you from other people. In a way, it helps you to relate better to other people, because your interior castle resides in everyone else. And when you go in there, into that room where Master always is, then you can find that space in others as well. And so it's quite a beautiful process.
There's another element to this, and that's that life goes in wave-like motions. There are times when things are easier and our meditations are going better and more deep, and then there are times when it's not so. But so it may be related to the fact that she spoke about it, or it may just be coincidental. But in this wave-like motion, we have the choice of giving up when the wave crashes and it becomes hard, or putting out the energy to continue. And so if we stop when things become more difficult, or our meditations become mechanical, our devotion isn't very strong, if we stop making the effort, then we simply retard our progress. And if we completely stop, then we're done for that lifetime. We'll come back, but have to go through the diaper stage first, which I prefer to avoid if I can. But so whatever comes, let's just keep putting out the best energy that we can, and then inevitably the wave begins to come up again, and we'll find that meditation gets easier, devotion gets more natural, all of the things that we're trying to do. But that wave-like motion isn't just flat. It's like climbing a mountain, and we go up and up and up and up. It has its ups and downs, but if we keep at it, our consciousness keeps ascending.
And just to reassure the woman who asked the question, if you're listening online or maybe you watch this later, don't despair. It will come back. It's just the process, as Jyotish was saying. try and don't think, oh, I've lost it forever. Not at all. It will come back. But just try to remember. Sometimes that's what opens the door. Remember what it felt like. And then little by little, oh yes, now it's like if you're cooking a dish you haven't cooked for a long time. Oh, I forgot how to do that. Then, oh yes, now it comes back. Or playing a piece of music that you haven't played for a long time. You just, yes, now I know how to do it. So it will come back. Just rest assured you haven't lost it and you haven't burned any bridges, please.
Okay. Why is sexual abstinence so important on the spiritual path? It's not especially that sexual abstinence is important, although abstinence, avoiding. So it's not so much that although sexuality takes energy, takes life force, and the more your life force goes into the senses, the more outward it becomes. And the spiritual path is meant to withdraw the energy from the senses and bring it up into the superconsciousness. So the more we emphasize any of the strong pulls of the senses, of possession and pleasure and power, any of those elements that draw the energy out, the harder it becomes to feel the subtle energies within. And so it's not so in our spiritual path and in our Sevaka order, we don't have sexual abstinence, but we have self-control. And so we try to have self-control over those outward-going energies. And then there comes a time at which the outward pulls are not so strong, and then it's good. It's always good to have some degree, as much as you can, without repression, as much as you can, a degree of self-control. And then there comes a time when the pull becomes weak enough that you no longer need to be involved in sexuality and sexual activity.
Master has a wonderful article called How to Overcome Bad Habits. And he talks about the importance, not just of sexual control, but any area of our life where we don't have self-control, if it's overeating or drinking or whatever it might be. And there's a great power when we begin to discipline ourselves. Recently, I was talking with a friend of mine who's been a devotee for many years, but as a young woman, she had a problem with alcohol, and she had to really go through training and rehabilitation, and then she's been not drinking for 20 years, something like that, maybe more. But she was talking to me, and she said, I have a little bit of fear that in my next life I'll be caught up in that pattern of drinking again because it brought me so much suffering. And I said, oh no, well, that is not how it works. You've already put up the resistance to that pull. And this is what Master says in the article. It's so important when you put that self-discipline and resistance to sensual temptation, then that strength stays with you. It's not like oh no, I'm going to slide back into that. And I said, you don't have to worry. You've already, she said, well, the draw is still there. And I said, yes, of course it is. But like in that beautiful song, every effort we spend brings more light in the end. So till our gladness in God's ever new. So just know every obstacle, everything we resist of temptation, that builds a strength within us, and we don't lose that. We carry that from lifetime to lifetime until finally our gladness in God's ever new. So, and if we all have friends who have problems with one addiction or another. Sexuality is one of them. Alcohol is one of them. Many. But we need to cheer them on. You can do this. You can overcome this. And it's a great victory. And in a way, the action is less important than the action itself is less important than the ability to say, no, I am stronger. I am stronger than that attraction. And it's a very joyful experience when you come to that.
And one of the things that Master emphasizes, and one of the reasons that we create these spiritual communities, is that when you live in uplifted environments with uplifted people, environment is more important than self-control or willpower. Yeah, environment is more important than willpower. And so when you're trying to overcome a habit, make sure that your environment is as good as you possibly can, and be among people that that's not a problem for them. If you're struggling with alcohol, do not mix with people who drink alcohol, period. Somebody once said a wonderful statement to remember: show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
So I think the time has come, the walrus said. So I think we're supposed to end at 5:15. We can go on, but you tell us what to do.
Can't hear.
One more question.
One more question.
Okay. Darshan.
Okay.
Jyotish and Devi, how important is creativity on the spiritual path, and especially on the Ananda path?
And what's the last thing you said?
Especially
on the
on
spiritual path and also on the Ananda path.
Okay.
creativity is extremely important. And I think Darshan may be speaking about how important are the arts, but the element of creativity, doing something in a new way, letting a flow of new ideas find fulfillment through you, it's very important. It's also important in meditation. Don't let your meditations become routine all the time. Do a little bit of experimentation. Maybe if you have been doing Hong Sau just kind of as an appetizer to get on to your Kriyas, do an hour meditation with Hong Sau, trying to go deeper and deeper and change things around. Don't let it always get into a rut. But how important are the arts? The arts are very, very important. We just had a 2-week-long festival of the joyful arts where we talked about this, and allowing, because the arts by and large bypass the mental verbal aspect of our brain. And so doing the arts, sharing the arts, all of that is very important. But creativity can be there in every aspect of your life. Swami said that Master was so creative that he never tied his shoelaces the same way twice.
That's food for thought, right?
Yes.
But Swami was an extraordinarily creative person. But I think what was so beautiful about his creativity was he never felt he was the doer. It was God coming through him in the music, in the photography, and the writing, and the talk, speaking, and the writing that he did. So that's the peril of creativity, is when you start thinking, I am the doer, I have to create, I have to be creative. But if you just can let the ego sit in the background for a while and just say, oh, this is happening now. And that's what real art is when the doer the ego doer gets out of the way, and the divine doer just creates this flow of beautiful energy. And, Swami tells the story when he was composing that piece of music, God is a Magician, and how it was late at night, he just wanted to go to sleep. He'd been doing things all day long, and he started to get into bed, and then all of a sudden the song started coming, and he just said, oh, do I really have to do this now? And he knew he did, and he got up and he composed the music for it, but it was so clear he wasn't thinking, I'm going to write a song now. It just came through him. So the creative process is a pathway to self-transcendence, ideally.
Now, usually when Devi and I do question and answers, we also share a little humor to demonstrate that joy is a part of the spiritual path. So I'll tell you a joke. This mother comes into her son's bedroom, and he's still asleep. It's later in the morning. She says, get up, you have to go to school. And he says, I don't want to go to school. He pulls the cover over his head. She said, get up, you have to go to school. She says, there are two reasons. He says, there are two reasons I don't want to go to school. All the children, they hate me. And all the teachers, they hate me too. And the mother says, get up. There's two reasons you have to go to school. You're 50 years old and you're the principal of the school. Okay.
Thank you all. Thank you for your it was wonderful sharing with you, because you were all very attentive, let's use that word. Okay, God bless you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, with the last one, but that isn't a nice question.